I'm going to give Mike one more minute and then we're going to get started. Right. Really like to give you an opportunity to get
by Carlson right now.
Well, I saw no emails from anybody saying no, so can't make it.
I'm curious, what's the current?
Oh God, I'm not too sure. They're always different. Do they have the, yes, I was gonna ask if they were the fun
These
magnetic
are
ones.
new today. I just got these, like I ordered these because the Etsy shop people know me and they're like, here's a coupon for you, Miss Wonderful. I'm like, oh,
And it worked.
oh,
It did.
20% off, okay. Okay, guys, we're gonna go ahead and get started and hopefully Mike will join us. So we're starting at 6:02. This is the December 19th Historic Preservation Review Commission work session. I am going to add a new business piece to the front before we get to our pre-application meeting. Don't worry, it's not a long one. It's just very brief. First, we are advertising for an alternate. This was mentioned in City Council because our alternate needed to resign. So if you know someone, if you have a friend, that'd be great. We'd love to hear from them. We are working on sites and facilities. And so hopefully first quarter of next year, we will have that resolved for how that's going to be structured and what that's going to look like. And toward that end, Jonathan would like to do a tour with us in January. I know we keep talking about a tour, but can we talk about dates that do not work? So I know like what we can give to Jonathan. Do you want a weekend?
Yeah, I could, I'm open. I was kind of thinking maybe one way we could do it. If you guys all want to like look at your calendars and send me something maybe by Wednesday, or well, not by Wednesday, that's tomorrow. All right. Maybe by the end of the week about what works for you. I could get something on the schedule that fits, or conversely, I could send you guys a doodle poll if that's easier. But
what?
Like a doodle poll or something, or
I like the poll.
Yeah,
I like the poll.
okay. I'll send one out in the morning and then we can get everybody kind of collaborated so we can figure it out. Is there like a general couple of days or kinds of days that work best for people? Like,
do we need weekends?
Weekends.
Okay.
Weekends. Okay. So Saturday or Sunday morning.
All right, I'll send out a couple and then we can see what fits. And we will notice it like a regular meeting, so we'll need just a little bit advance to put it up in advance, but no problems.
Because I would like to do that before, we get hit with like February, March snow.
Okay.
We can't, because I really want to go across the river. Okay, so with that, let's move on, close our new business and go on to our pre-application meeting. This is for 1535 Minor Street. My name is Lisa Manifold. I am the chair of this position. I know Carla, and would you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Julie Stevens, and I bought the Opera House, and we're really excited to put like music back into it. So
let me just really quickly, just for everybody's kind of benefit, we have the ability in our Hprc ordinance to have what's called like a pre-application meeting with Hprc before someone applies for certificate of appropriateness. This project's at 1535 Minor Street. And staff has met with the applicant a couple of times in a pre-application format, and we thought it would be a good idea to bring them to Hprc to discuss kind of some of their ideas for the project and then give you guys a chance to get feedback. So one of the things I just like to remind you is that you will hear this probably likely in a COA hearing in the future. So one of the things about this conversation that would be good is to keep it kind of at a high level, but you have some latitude to talk about what our guidelines say, what might work for the project, where you might see some challenges and things like that. So feel free to ask questions of staff if you have a question, or you can ask questions of the applicant. I think they've got a little bit of a presentation for you, and I think that we can just kind of take it from there.
I'm going to share. So I am the architect for the Opera House for Julie's project, which will be called River Sound Studio. And I'll put my glasses back on so I can see. And as much as I try to keep it at a high level, I don't do a very good job at that because I get too excited and I know way too much stuff. So, so know that we are in, I'll say we're in pre-design. We haven't done paper to pen really yet, but there are a lot of concepts, and Julie comes with a lot of knowledge on how to build and what to build and that kind of stuff. So we are a little bit further ahead than we might be in some ways, but we have not really finalized anything at this point. We're here to really just kind of get some feedback from you guys on.
Yeah, so this is my first historical building. I've done a lot of remodels and construction projects, but I've never done anything so cool before. And so I don't have the background that you guys have. So I really wanted to meet with you and get your ideas of how to make it work and feel really cohesive. Like we don't want to touch the front of the building at all, maybe update the paint. But we're wanting to do something on the back of the building. The back of the building is, well, it's terrible. And before I even like start dreaming about what I'd want that to look like, I really wanted your input so that I dream in the right direction.
Do you have, and Carl, I'm sure you have the design guidelines.
Yep.
You know, where the design guidelines have a gap, definitely look at Secretary of Interior, and if they both have gaps, because we have experienced that on this commission where they don't give us enough direction, please, please, please come and talk to us, because we are always happy, like staff is always happy to talk to you, Dylan will be happy to talk to you, but we are always happy to talk to you. I know that we get a rep of, oh, you're just trying to put regulations, but we're not. It's a historic building, it's a National Register, you know, and I feel, I know the rest of the commission is too, pretty protective about our, because we don't have a big historic area, so you're one of only like 44 buildings.
No, and I
So
totally get that.
we would
That's
rather
what's so cool
you
about the building, so
talk to us.
we don't wanna mess it up.
We're always gonna try to work with you. Our goal is not to make things onerous or burdensome. But how do we make this work within our design guidelines, respect the building, and still, you know, not cost you thousands upon thousands extra? Because that is a concern.
Yeah, it has to be economically feasible, but
Yeah.
anyway.
So some of this, and I'll go through it, some of these slides pretty quickly, but part of it is to also make sure that you guys understand that we have done some homework and John has given us quite a bit of information as well, so that we know kind of what guidelines, you know, what our framework is essentially. But it's also to help remind us as we're going through this process of design that, okay, we have to go back to these things. So, with that, if I can make my computer go forward. Not going forward.
While you're doing that, Carla, do you have the nomination form for this building? That was the net, because that could help a little bit,
Okay,
but it doesn't really have anything. I can send this to you.
okay,
It doesn't really have anything
We have some more,
about the back.
we have some stuff in the city documents about more about the building.
Okay,
Thing. And you don't have that either, but we can get that to you.
it's like 3 sentences,
oh, okay,
but it does point out some specific decorative features, so.
okay. And so, as Julie said, we're not touching the front of the building. So this is the building we're talking about. It is the old Opera House. And the sign on the front here that says Opera House. It does also say that it's erected in 1912. There was some discussion with John about it possibly being.
This is Mike, he's one of our
Okay.
commission members. I guess you guys have met before.
It's been a long time. Should I keep going? Okay. And then, so from a site plan, it is next to Citizens Park. So Citizens Park is right here, the Moose is down here. And of course, we've got Idaho Street along the back and Meyer Street along the front. And Idaho Street is really the one that we're talking about changes to primarily. Just from a program standpoint, so that you guys understand, level 2 is and will remain residential units. There's 3 units up there, and there will be 3 units. Julie would like to add a roof deck, so that, you know, there's some criteria in the historic guidelines for that. And then the lower level, level 1, will be approximately 4,000 square feet of business, and it will be a professional sound studio for sound recordings. And then the front retail space, front approximately 1,000 square feet, will remain retail, and will be a tasting room similar to what the Mead tasting room was, but a very different experience and more. But it is a tasting room and retail space. And then we are looking at digging out the basement level to be more additional business space as well. So it could be art studios, it could be more sound studios, but essentially that's so, and we don't expect that will impact the exterior of the building or the facade at all. So just from a quick scheduling standpoint, today is the work session with you guys. We expect that this is going to go through an FDP plan because of the addition of the lower level at the basement. So we have a council session that we've talked to staff about scheduling and then working in the certificate of appropriateness hearing. It's a hearing, right? Is that how you phrase that?
Yes.
In February, and then targeting an FDP at the end of February, an FDP hearing at the end of February, so that we can have that in place for building permits. But now we're kind of targeting June, but Julie would like to speed that up as much as possible. So that's why we're trying to get all the entitlement pieces together sooner. So we understand from the COA submittal will be an application, deposit fee, architectural elevations, concept plan, and a cover letter. And then we believe this is applicable because it is a modification to the back that we're asking for. And there's some exceptions in there that talk about stair safety and ADA accessibility. That's kind of for you guys to decide once we kind of present, because we are saying if you'd like to replace the stair with a safer stair on the back of the building that's covered, as well as add an elevator for the residences and the lower level. So, so from a historic standpoint, we know in 1889 photographs, the building was not there. There is, you can sort of see, and I've got a better picture, but there was a building next to it back in that time, which was sitting on the Citizens Park site. But in this picture, you actually don't even see Joe's yet. And then
there was actually a house there.
Yeah, there were a bunch of smaller, I don't know what they were, but they looked like houses. Yeah.
That was the only house on Beach, on that stretch of line there.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
And then today you see where I have something sitting on the desktop here. So then that's the back of the building there. So you've got Bojo's, and then you've got I don't know if it's still called Canyon Trading. That's the shorter building. And then you've got the Opera House in the back. So a little bit clearer picture and zoomed in. So you can see there was 15th Avenue is sort of that blue line. And it was running between this building was sitting on Civic Center Park, Citizens Park, sorry. And then there was the building across the street, which is now our beloved CenturyLink building. And then back you can see there's nothing there. And even here there was no Bojo's or sit and chill at that point.
What year was this photo?
Say that again.
What year was this photo?
This is the 1889. This is dated 1889. And then just for reference, like it is the site of Mountain Prime here. So Mountain Prime actually wasn't even built at that point. Probably houses there. So just a couple of historic photos here. This one is dated 1880 to 1900 in the Denver Library Archives. So I've sort of identified where that building would sit in that photo. And I'm not sure those dates make a whole lot of sense to me because the school, the school was there in the background. So I think that was closer, if I remember correctly, that was closer to 1900. So here's a different view looking towards the southwest. So you can see where the building would have been there. You can see that building was there. This is 1883. In 1938, we see that the building is there, and you can actually see the building that was the buildings that were actually adjacent to it at that point. It looked like there was a smaller building and possibly a wider building there at some point. And then this is looking east. So here's the historic image where it appears that the building was not, and there was not a date on this background photo here. And then this is modern day. So you can see, you should be able to see the roof line there, and it's not there. So we know that we need to adhere to the guidelines, Lisa, that you had mentioned before, City of Idaho Springs, this Colorado State Historic Preservation Office, as well as the National Park Service. So from the City of Idaho Springs, it needs to be compatible with the historic character, use of materials and design, structural integrity, visual impact and scale. Some little bit different, but similar from the SHPO, preserve the historic features, provide historical context, documentation of detailed changes. And then from the National Park Service, again, compatible with the historic character, should be distinguishable and not destroy the historic nature of the building. And then interior standards for rehabilitation. So from a historic structure preservation goals are protect, enhance, and perpetuate the history of the structure. And just to sort of set the stage, the facts about this project, we believe it was built around 1912, since that's what the sign on the building says. North elevation along Minor Street will not change. We're not proposing changes to that Minor Street elevation, other than potentially paint, which I understand is allowed for within the historic district. The west elevation is concealed. It is actually the shared wall with Canyon Trading. And then the east elevation was concealed at one time. We know that there were buildings attached to that building at one time. You can actually see it in the exterior as well. And then we know that the south elevation is the one where we would like to reconstruct the existing stair and add a elevator, as well as modify some of the exterior door openings there. So from the front, the north elevation on Minor Street, it will not change. It still has the stained glass windows. One question is about adding energy efficient windows and doors, and I don't know. That is something I think we'd like to do.
I would love to do that, but I don't know what the guidelines are for that. Like, how do we make it still look historical, or do we even try and do that? We just leave it the way it is for energy efficiency.
There's several things you can do. There are people who make like additional like storm windows that make old windows work better. There's a bunch of companies in Denver like Spectrum that will build you new windows, double hung windows and things like that. But the guidelines, they're not big on the idea of like vinyl windows or modern windows. It would have to be in the character. It's the same thing as about doors. It has to be in the character of the building and the time frame.
One of the things we look at are those original windows or not? They
Yeah.
might not be, and if they're not, that gives a little more flexibility.
And we're just looking for the storefront to have maybe like double pane windows, just because they're just single pane windows, I believe. At least the doors are just single pane. So I don't know if that's permissible within the guidelines or not.
In the application, it says second story rectangular double hung windows. That's the only mention of original windows. Let's see.
I'm not even
The
sure.
second story windows are definitely not historical.
Yeah.
They're double hung, but they're I think they're vinyl, like they're.
But the storefront windows would be considered a character defining feature, even though they're not mentioned for that style of building or for that type of building. So maintaining that look would be important.
Yeah,
Again,
that's
it'd be-
pretty key.
It'd be
Right, so if
a matter
you
of
did
looking
it-
again if it's original or not, and if it's not original, it still would be desirable to maintain the look if it's new materials.
Is it possible? Because I don't know. Is it possible to do a double pane window with like a wood casing and make it look historically sound, but have a better energy efficiency? Or by doing the double pane, does it lose that?
It might be possible to add a second pane behind the existing pane. Again, I think the first thing is just to find out, is that existing
if it's
Is that
100-year-old
actually historic?
glass or not,
Yeah,
right?
that's the historic glass, that's one
That's a
thing,
different
if it's
story,
not
yeah.
historic, then it can be replaced with modern glass.
With the cans, I have been in houses where storm windows have been made and put behind the original windows, so it still gives you a higher energy efficiency, but you're not getting rid of the historic window.
And that would be the preferred approach, is to add this. Again, if it's an original window, then yes, putting a storm window behind it rather than in front of it.
What do you need as documentation that it is or is not historic window?
Well, the start point, we go out and look at it and see.
Right.
That's a good question as to exactly how to document it.
Yeah.
Part of it is by looking at it to see if it looks like if it's from that time period. Particularly we get some of the other buildings where we do know buildings that do have original windows, just look and see by comparison.
Gotcha, okay, so it's really more of a visual test, it's not
Yes,
certification, so to speak.
yes, unless you're able to find a local glass company in
That can
the
say
Denver
yes
area,
or no.
they could say, yes, we know this,
Specialized.
we know this particular glass was only built during this period of time. It's not something to go crazy over, because one place where I had worked is someone spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to figure that out, and that particular out had no intent did not intend for them to spend as much time and money. They tried to figure out what it was.
Yeah.
They took a sample from Western Colorado to Denver to show them, to show a glass company, this is what it is. Do you think it's historic or not?
Okay.
Guidelines has some like pretty specific language about windows though that you can look
They
at.
do, it's on page, in the guidelines, it's on page 12, and it talks about, restoration is preferred. And preferred is one of those words where we strongly suggest.
Right.
Replacement with a similar feature is an option, and then it goes down through the list of how to determine, if you can't repair, how do you replace?
Okay, so then the other question is, when we come in front of you again for the actual hearing, you need actual details and specifics about what it is, right?
When you come to get that COA from us, we need to see all of your bits. To put that, like, we need to see what you're going to do. Anything that is impacted by the design guidelines, anything that is exterior, we need to see it.
Okay,
So for that, you want to have, like, this is high level. For that, you want to be very specific, very down in the details.
okay,
So we'll have some review, like some, like I'll have engineering attached to it and things like that, and some other referrals potentially. So we'll help make sure you guys have everything you need for the hearing.
It's a site plan, it's elevations, it's probably floor plans. It may be some construction details around the windows, construction details around what you're doing in the front.
okay,
So like if it turns out you're gonna propose to change something on the front windows, then a detail that shows that, and probably a manufacturer's cut sheet
okay.
for whatever product if
Yes.
you're proposing to substitute a different window,
Mhm.
a manufacturer's cut sheet of the product you're proposing to use.
Gotcha, okay. Okay. So from the south elevation, which is really more the focus of what we want to change, and I don't know what page it is, but it's number 23 in the design guidelines. It talks about alley entrances. And so when I'm kind of presenting this, but I'm really asking some questions to you guys to get feedback and to get to understand how you guys.
Oh, that's super light on detail.
Well, and so, I mean, if I read it, it sort of says, we want you to, make it more inviting, right? But then at some point, we're really talking about in the historic guidelines, not changing things. So how do you make it more inviting while not changing things, right? And so.
I think part of the thing to think about is that the long-term plan for downtown is that what used to be the alley where the tracks ran as sort of a pedestrian way.
Mhm.
And so part of that, and there's certain cities, for example, like Fort Collins is a good example where they're doing things with their alleys to make, they're not drastically changing the alleys, but they're making them more attractive to people. What's a little different here is normally, if it were just a functional alley, it would be less important, but this is a case of where that alley is kind of an important feature for downtown, so it's not like it's just the place where the trash
It's
is
not out of
put.
sight, out of mind. It's
Yeah.
actually gonna be a place where people are traversing and looking.
Wait,
If-
SHPO is
if-
also, oh, sorry.
And from the standpoint of the Park Service, they look at it from the standpoint of what's visual to the public. That's why the emphasis is usually always on the front, but some cases, and this is one of those cases where the back is also important.
SHPO's been really talking to us a lot about view shed, looking from the south to the downtown and maintaining the view shed of historic buildings.
And hopefully it doesn't get blocked by a parking garage.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where we had this conversation. So,
Well, what they say is that development of the alley should keep in style with the main building and the simple functional quality. So I think there is room for not being quite as ornate as the front, but in the same style and the same design. That would be my interpretation.
So,
Yeah,
the same style and design as what's on the front of the building? Is that what you're saying?
As it is historically.
Yeah, what-
Amount of windows, size of windows, same with the word.
If that's a
There's not a lot
historic
of-
wall, then it's more,
There's not a lot going on
if
No.
No,
that-
there's not.
if the rear
No, and the
wall is a
doors are-
historic
they're
wall,
not
then it's a matter of
historic, they're like
cleaning that
storefront
wall
doors,
up,
so.
as opposed to covering it up. Covering it up is usually very undesirable.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So, so you can see today, to me, sorry, Julie, but this is
It looks like a
undesirable.
piece of.
That is a functional back alley.
Yeah,
It is.
And we barely.
And there was a deck approved in 2017. Is that deck still there?
There's
I
like
mean-
little, I don't know
Yeah,
if they're calling it deck.
There was a little deck that was approved in 2017.
Tiny little patio about the size of this table.
On top of the one-story part.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
might, so you'll be able to.
Yeah,
Oh,
there was a CO in 2017 for that, COA in 2017 for that.
Okay.
I think that's when they redid it though.
yeah, so you can see, so and there's actually a door here into the back unit.
Oh, you can sort of
That's-
see that, yeah.
That's not there. So this is the second level here. This is actually, we call it 2.5 because it is approximately 3 feet higher than level 2 of the building on the backside for some reason. And so we've actually got a door here. So you come up the stairs and you can walk to this door at the back, and then you can traverse from near the, closer to the exterior wall to this other little patio deck, which is maybe 10 by 10, not even. No, it's like
8 by 8 maybe.
yeah, yeah. And then there's a door into the unit there. So this door is a common door, and then this door is directly into a unit. So when we talk about a new deck on the back side, we're talking not just an 8 by 8, we're talking
Like a roof deck,
a
like.
full roof deck, yeah. So that's another thing to consider here. So looking through the guidelines, some of the questions I had are, what is the historical character of the building? And is the rear facade the intended character? You know, to me, the front of the building is definitely where the notable architectural features are. And when we talk about the rear, and I think you may have sort of hit the nail on the head there, is, you know, it needs to be in character with the back alley, but it doesn't necessarily need to be ornate like the front of the building.
But if if the building, if we accept that the building was 1912, what are the design characteristics that you would look at in 1912? Like, that's what I would want to see, something that falls within that. Maybe not as ornate as the front, because the front is very ornate, I think. But because that is that's going to be a view, and we're gonna be seeing Idaho Street, you know, as where people are walking, like, I think that's a consideration. It's very gray.
And it's very great.
So,
It's possible though to sort of dress up without changing buildings, and I could
Yeah.
give you a couple of examples. If you, in Boulder, there used to be an auto garage that went to a bicycle shop, and all they did was they basically just cleaned up the facade.
Mhm.
It was a plain brick with a little bit of decoration, and they didn't really add anything to it, but it actually has a very nice, it's actually facing the street, but it was a very industrial, almost looking building, and it fits in very well into a historic downtown. And all they mainly did was just clean it up and put in new window frames.
The existing openings.
But I could pass on to Jonathan a couple of locations of where people have taken simple, if you haven't done that before, or just sort of where people just cleaned up the buildings.
Sure,
And
yeah,
they-
that makes sense, yeah. So I'm gonna keep going. So, the original proportions of the structure is a two-story along the front. What we're saying is we'd like to extend some of that two-story to the back. We'd like to redo the stair in the back, and we'd like it to be a covered stair, an enclosed stair with an elevator. And so that means that the back of the building does get taller.
In that particular point, that's the Secretary of Interior Standard number 9 is the important one on that.
Okay.
Because that's where they talk about compatible with distinguishable. It's the standard that people have always had trouble with understanding what that one's about.
Yeah, that's the one I'm having a little trouble with.
Well, like downtown, some of the new stuff that they built downtown is a good example of that, right? Like in Denver, some of those buildings, they use similar building styles.
Yeah, but the idea is it should look compatible, but you should be able to tell it's an addition
Right.
as opposed to just an extension, just making the existing building look longer. You can actually tell it's an addition.
Didn't we see some of that at, Stadium Places last year where they put
We did.
rooftop decks? I was just thinking, rooftop decks on top of historic buildings.
There's also a theater in, where's that? I just went there. Maybe it was in Montrose or somewhere like that. 'Cause
So
they
the
did something
question I
similar.
have there is, if we talk about, because there's also use of materials and design elements that to me says, okay, if we're going to build something new on the back, if that's allowed, then it should be of similar brick to the historic downtown area. But if it's gotta be distinguishable, then you go, okay, should it be the same brick? Or is that distinguishable? Can that be in the form or proportions?
There's sort of a range of what distinguishable could be. It could even be a different kind of brick.
Okay.
I think most of the time people are try and do it like with a wood siding rather than with brick. And that's probably where you need to find out from a structural engineer how much weight you can put on the back of the building.
Well, would you wanna do, well, if it's an addition to the back, and you'll see it here in a minute, but it's an addition to the back. Distinguishable would say to me, you could clad it with, you want it to be clad with, say, a vinyl siding, but you don't.
You wouldn't want to buy vinyl siding because
It's not in character to,
it's out of character. It's not something that is historic in the district. It's not historic material.
okay,
But for example, if it was a wood building, if the main building was wood, it might be a different type of wood. It might have a different profile to the shape of the siding.
oh, interesting,
Or
okay,
different type of grain look.
Yeah, those are ways of making something. One of the other things you can look at is a few years ago, the National Park Service updated I think it's National Register Bulletin 14,
okay,
which is about additions to existing historic structures.
okay. 14,
I think it's number 14.
and that's under the national,
The National Register, you go to their website and it should be, you just put, I think it'll be called National Register Bulletin 14. And it's additions to existing buildings.
thank you. Okay. So from a brick standpoint, could it be, if we use the same brick, so it looks similar, but we could do a different kind of coursing.
Or different brick pattern,
Yeah.
or,
Is that, or is that still not distinguishable enough?
Well, but you could, well, it's, in part, it's necessary to see it, but,
Sure.
one of the ways it's done is by changing the pattern of what you're looking at.
Okay.
For example, how it's corbelled at the top, or if there's different kind of brick detailing, elsewhere on the wall.
Okay.
That is a way of distinguishing. It's better seeing, you see a building which is basically L-shaped, 2 stories, 1 story. Can you tell that this was an addition and not simply, it was originally a 2-story building all the way back?
Gotcha.
That's the one of being able to that's
You
the
don't wanna-
distinguished part.
I got you. You don't want to
Is-
be able to, you don't
It
want it
shouldn't
to
be
be faked.
seamless. It
Yeah.
should be, we should be able to tell, oh, this looks really great from a design standpoint, it flows, but it's clear that this was an addition
Gotcha.
versus it was built this way.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you guys.
because, yeah, we have that partial basement with the retaining wall underneath with the original brick. And I really wanted to use that on the addition, so if we did that in a different pattern, would that kind of be in the right vein, so that it was like, I don't know, it still felt like the same building, but it was different, or does it need to be like wood siding or something completely different? What,
Yeah, it
What would you
sounds to me,
suggest?
it sounds to me like we can use the brick.
yeah,
And we just want it is a different pattern, a different coursing, so to speak.
Well, one other thing you can do is just take some time going through the district and see if you can find examples of what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
In other words, has this already been done? Not recently, but in the
Right.
past, it looks like there was an addition to a building that was done like this. So in other words, it's something already in the character of the district.
There are a couple. We could go walk and see.
Gotcha. So we believe there are notable features on, we believe that the notable features on the back of the building are scarce. So,
Yeah.
you know, we know that there's 2 doors. We have no idea if they're original openings because we can't find a rear image from a historic image of this building. We know that the doors themselves are storefront doors, so they're likely not from 1912. And at that point, you know, so one of the things we're talking about is to brick in one of these doors to make the space inside usable, and then enlarge one of these other openings.
so that you can get music gear in and out.
So it would be more like an 8x8 opening there. And in thought, it could then.
Are the
I've got some
doorways
images.
original? Not the doors themselves, but are the door openings original to the
I don't know.
building?
It's kind of hard to tell, and we need to investigate the brick coursing there a little bit more. But this whole wall and then the wall that's adjacent to Civic Center Park, there's openings that have been bricked in, and you know, there's actually from the inside, you can't tell so much from the outside, but from the inside, actually maybe that opening is right there. There's actually like an opening that was here at some point. And whether or not it was an original opening or whether or not it was cut in, you know, in the 50s or, you know.
And is the opening you want, that's a functional need for the business?
I have a question about that. On the equipment that needs to go in there, most music equipment, like you couldn't have a concert in LA ever if you couldn't get it through small doors. Like most music equipment is made to go through.
Yeah,
Smaller
so
doors.
I've talked to quite a few people in the music industry to kind of get an idea how big that door actually needs to be. And the thing is, a lot of people will bring like their drum cases or whatever in roadie carts, right? And so it's probably no less than 42 inches wide. But if you could make it 5 feet wide, at least, then people aren't scraping their knuckles on the sides. But a lot of roadie carts could be even 4 feet wide. And most music venues where, you know, you're bringing in like a whole band or whatever, they do have double doors or wider doors so that people can get, you know, a grand piano through or whatever they need to get through comfortably.
This is just a personal opinion. I think from a functional standpoint, it seems like a small concession.
Okay.
To be able to have a wider opening. I don't know about 8 feet, but you're already at 7 feet with a commercial door anyway,
In terms of height.
in terms of height,
We
yeah.
were talking about the width.
Yeah, in terms of, like I said, that's just a personal opinion, I think.
Yeah,
As a concession for for a new function to continue the space, it doesn't bother me personally, but I'm just one member.
Any other thoughts on that? Because that's more significant than anything that we've talked
The
about.
guidelines say it should be within character of what you see in door openings, right? Something to that effect.
like if we could character it as looking like a barn door or something like that, so that it would look in,
Like a barn door.
Again, it might be looking at other buildings.
yeah, and seeing what they did, or a nice
Going-
French
going-
door, or
Yeah, going down
whatever it
both
is,
alleys and seeing what's there.
yeah. Mhm.
Because I imagine somewhere there must be double doors.
They're not
So-
original, which does affect it.
I want to keep
Yeah.
going because I do have some more images that sort of talk about things that we have looked at, that we'd like to maybe propose and get a reaction from you guys on. And then, work is intended to complement and be compatible within the district and enhance the overall structure. And this is more of a statement for our design principles here, and enhance the overall structure in Idaho street frontage, essentially, because we are aware of the master plan that's happening, the intent of that Idaho street master plan. And then we've talked already about that distinguish it from the old. That was one of the big questions I had.
Actually, from the picture he's got here, there's double doors next door
There are,
to the west.
Yeah, like a French door,
yeah,
right,
and
with
I've
wood
got,
casing.
I've got some
So the
images.
question would be for me, just been looking at our design guidelines. It says altering the original size and shape is inappropriate, so I would need to know, are these original? Because inappropriate is one of the strong words that our design guidelines uses, well, we really don't wanna see that. Restoring original openings which have been altered over time, so if you knew where there was something that had been bricked over that you could use, that would also be an acceptable compromise.
So this was a movie theater, so I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't another opening on the back. I'd be surprised if there was just one door on the back.
Well,
When it
yeah,
was-
and
when it was-
so,
When it was a movie theater.
yeah, so today there's 2 openings that have storefront doors now. I believe one of those is probably original. And so the other question is, if we brick in one of those openings, is that a concern for the
If
commission?
it's original, yes.
It'd be preferred to leave the door even if it's not a functional door. In other words, it could be turned to something that looks like a door, but it's actually a window.
Okay,
We did a similar thing, not a door window, but on the hose house.
Yes, we did.
The
Yeah.
man door is not actually functional.
gotcha. So from a proportion standpoint, so looking at the front, we know that the Bojo's building is pretty similar in height to the Opera House. So this is the taller Bojo's building. You'll see it on the back here in a minute. And then this is the Opera House here. So we know that these are very similar in height on the front of the building. And I say that because looking at the back of the building, what we're proposing is that, and this image is sort of deceptive because there is actually the second story of the building behind it here. That is from the angle of the photo, you can't really see it. But if you were to bring that second story forward, similar to Bojo's, it would be more in line there, yeah. So, from an elevation standpoint, so you can see here, this is the second story at the front of the building. And what we're proposing is that, and this form could change, a little bit from the next time you see it, but, and this is sort of a question to you guys, like, is this even within the realm of possibilities, right? To say, okay, we wanna extend that upper level closer to the back of the building. And from a proportional standpoint on the 15th block of Idaho Street, graphically, visually, I think extending that second story actually complements that 15th Street historic nature. Because as you see in the 1883 picture, this is that building that was there at Civic Center at Citizens Park. And so a lot of these buildings were 2-3 stories on the backside. Hard to tell, this one is obviously 3 stories. This one would look like it is as well, though I'm not 100% sure there. So, so what we're proposing is that that stair tower and elevator would go up on the backside. And it could look similar to the historic nature with the arched windows and the openings, similar to what you see next door to it at Bojo's. It would be covering some of that background there. And so so just from a mock-up, it could look something like that. Now, we could leave parts of the side if we needed to, so that you can see those doors. Again, those openings may be original, but the door itself is not original.
So the extension of the second floor is to the north, I mean, to the east rather than to the west side of the building? Is that correct?
Ideally, yeah.
Yes.
Is there a reason why it couldn't be oriented to the west side rather than the east side?
There's not a reason, it wouldn't be just a preference, because the that back apartment unit has quite a nice view right now, and you would lose all of that view.
Okay.
So what's gonna be in that extension?
So it is a stair and a wraparound stair, basically, instead of the straight.
So the straight fire escape looking thing that they've got there now, it would be one of those stairs that goes in a square, goes up like this,
And then the elevator.
and an elevator in a cupboard.
So the stair goes around the elevator?
No, it would be
it's,
adjacent. There's not enough depth there to make it go around the elevator.
So that raised part is basically gonna be your entrance into the apartment.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense.
And does the top of the elevator enclosure go up any higher than what you're showing?
So we're gonna try to minimize that. I mean, the intent is that it would time out with, so that it
It's
is.
the parapet, it wouldn't be higher than the parapet.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, any additions need to be subordinate to the original structure of the building, like they have to respect the original structure and not dwarf them.
So yes, so that is the question. I think looking at it,
So like maybe a lower parapet, more of a corbel
Well, and it says,
than an actual parapet. So its roof line is lower by several
yeah, it
feet.
says any addition should be visually subordinate to the main building.
So if you were intending on putting a parapet around it, instead of going up like 3 feet to be equal with what's in front, instead only going up 1 foot with a parapet, so that it looks like it's a step down, even though inside it's the same ceiling height.
I guess I'm confused because you wouldn't see it from the front of the building at all. It would definitely not be taller than the front of the building,
It would be the same height as the front of the building.
but it is definitely taller, as you can see, from the back of the building.
Yeah, and I think it's something to look at with that National Register Bulletin 14. What
Okay.
it basically talks about is it visible from primary points of view. The front is usually going to be the principal view. In this case, though, because of the park, you're going to be able to see this side of the building as well.
Okay.
And so that's where the subordinate probably comes into play, is because there's a park there and a 1-story structure there. The let's say the parapet line should be lower than the existing parapet, the parapet line on the addition should be lower than the parapet line on the existing structure, on the existing building. What I'm saying is it may be possible for you to have the same ceiling height in the addition and the existing building on the second floor. However, by stepping down, if there is there a parapet on the existing building?
A little bit, yeah.
So
On the back,
this would be stepping it down so you can see you notice that it is stepping down. It doesn't mean losing a floor. It doesn't mean.
But it would mean losing the floor.
Potentially, yeah, I think, yeah. So from a sectional standpoint, so this is the existing building as it is today.
And you know how tall the parapet is? Is it 3 feet? Is it 1 foot?
It
It's,
depends.
yeah, well,
Okay, like what I'm saying is that you have a top line at the north end of the building. You have a level top parapet going from the street, going south along the parapet.
okay,
When you put the addition on the back,
has to be lower.
can the addition be lower than that top line?
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay, yes.
Yeah.
That I think we can definitely, because the ceiling,
Well, that also looks like, when I look at this, it says, hold on, let me find it. It says a small connector linking the existing building, and so to me, when you're talking about the parapet line, like that angled line as it comes down, that almost makes me think connector, like,
Are you changing that sloping roof portion? You're not, you're leaving that.
yeah,
so what is your idea
Well-
for after you come down the end of that sloping roof?
so I take that back, so the sloping roof from this point forward is, I don't think we're touching that, right, Julie?
And if I had my wish list,
You put a new roof on it.
I put a new roof, yeah, I put a new energy, like efficient roof on it.
But your intent is not to change the appearance of that
Of
front, the
of
front part.
Not to change the silhouette at all,
Yes.
but can I seal your mouth?
Yes,
So if I had my wish, I would take on the east side of the building, I would extend the back unit, the back residential unit, all the way out to here. But just part of it, like maybe 12 feet out of the 44 width. So you get like a couple bedrooms along that wall that's adjacent to the retail space.
Mhm.
And then put a deck going towards the park. And then on that park that comes all the way back to the back with the same kind of roof line as what's happening. Like we extended this roof line out, on the same slope instead of having it come down so sharply right here.
But that's the historical original building.
Okay, so this would need to stay on the same slope.
so let me back you up there for a second,
I don't
because
think it is.
from this point forward, basically,
Is historical.
that's historical.
That's historical. What
This
about the
unit,
sloping?
say again,
What about that sloping?
yeah, that sloping piece is actually built on what appears to be the original roof.
You think
of the
you think that it was an
Oh, yeah.
addition, the
Yes.
sloping part is an addition, but you
It's
don't know when.
definitely an addition, don't know when, no.
Okay. And you might be able to check with the county building department
Yeah,
and see if they could tell you when that was put on and.
I would be surprised if anybody permitted that thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would be shocked.
Because what happens is that you can see this, so this is level 2 here for the for the
The front two
original
units, yeah.
units. And then there's stairs that come up about right here. And then what they did is they ran piping and utilities basically underneath that 3-foot difference essentially.
And they built the
existing roof.
third unit on top of the existing roof.
Something that used to be popular And the National Park Service even had it in one of their examples. Just as a different idea, is to just do this addition all in glass. In that way, there's transparency, or in other words, mostly glass, obviously not.
I would love that.
They actually used to show that as an example. There's a lot of people, including me, who thought it doesn't, their example is not very good. However, they were saying they thought that was okay. The reason being is they considered a glass addition as being transparent. And therefore, it's not changing what you see as the profile of the building, because it is predominantly glass.
It's still
I don't
showing
know
a
what a
very
glass elevator would
very
cost,
definitive difference between
Yes.
original and
Okay.
addition.
When they wrote the guidelines back in the 1960s, that was an extremely popular idea. As over time, it's become a very controversial idea.
I can see where it's controversial. I can also see why it's popular though. I can see,
I mean, it would be
I'm kinda
gorgeous
neutral on
to
this
kind of
one.
like, it would still show the original building, but with a modern like addition to it.
Yeah,
You know,
they,
to me, it'd be
they,
gorgeous, but I don't know if it really keeps the building as historical. Like,
Yeah.
I also kind of feel like it ruins the historical character of it.
Of the district.
Yeah.
kind of agree.
what
Yeah.
we're doing is you're creating something that kind of looks like an arboretum.
Yeah,
Or if you look at how the Hamel House does,
Although I don't know that you would really
they're,
see,
um,
like, so the elevator
Yeah,
and the
with the
stair
front.
on the back is one thing. But if we're just talking about the unit, the extension of the unit on the top, I mean,
you're not even gonna see it.
you really won't see it, because where she's talking about extending that unit is really more on the west side.
You won't be able to see it from the park.
You'd have to be elevated in order to see it. Yeah.
okay.
Kind of like in that one image.
Kind of like
that I
another
had.
image that from the parking lot, you can't see even the, the top of the roof.
Yeah,
really,
so like from here, you would, because it's not even down the center of the building, it's like the.
It's on the far
west
side.
quarter.
Yeah.
You know, if you divided it up into into quarters, it's like the quarter furthest west, so you wouldn't, and there's trees that are probably 80-year-old trees, maybe.
Yeah, they're not very healthy anymore.
Oh, really?
I don't know how long they're, yeah, you just.
We've
see
already
like
lost a couple
that tree's
partners,
been
They
out for a
they
long
scare
time.
me and I
Yeah.
think like fire flooders.
Yeah.
Some business trees last year.
However, that's, we can study that for sure, so that we have those answers.
I feel like as you're talking, I'm like, God, we really need to see like your plans for this.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I can't give you a yay or nay on this one. I don't know how the rest of you guys feel, but. I feel like
Right, and I was
it
hoping
could
to
be-
find like what's permissible, like this whole glass idea, would never have thought of that. Like what's permissible before we even go down the design rabbit hole and then have to start
Well,
over again.
one thing I would do though is as you have ideas, these two guys are your people to talk to because we would like to shepherd you through this before you come to us and say, look, we've done it all. Here's our COA, application. And we have to say no, like we do
Right.
not want to say no if we
Right.
can avoid it. So lots of communication with Dylan and John is
Okay.
key. And I know I'm speaking for them and they're probably like, they wish they could kick me under the table, but it actually makes everybody's life easier if you talk to the staff before you come to us with all of your plans in place and we have to, shoot your dreams out from us, because we don't want to do
Well,
that.
that's why I wanted to have this meeting anyway, is so that I didn't have a dream that got shot down.
Would it be reasonable to say a meeting in January with sketches rather than finished drawings?
Okay.
In order to be able to show your concept, or maybe even if you have several ideas, simple sketches.
Like if you have options 1, 2, and 3, and you love all of them,
Mhm.
you have to love all of them, because if you don't, we pick the one you love the least. That's just,
That's how it works.
that's how it goes.
And one of the things about the National Register, there's always a preferred alternative, but there's
Yes.
also an acceptable number 2 and an acceptable number 3. In other words, there's something that's maybe this is the ideal solution, but that doesn't mean there isn't an alternative that also works, even as it's not as good, but it still meets the guidelines.
So from a standpoint of the stair and the elevator on the back of the building, and assuming we can make it subordinate to the front and from those views. It sounds to me like it is possible if done within the proper parameters.
I do have a question about that. When I look at how they're talking about decks, will you be able to do this addition with the elevator and the stairs? Also, because the deck should also be subordinate in terms of scale and detail. Like, will that work for what your plans are? Because it's not the huge, like, you think you have a lot of space to play with, but it's not like.
So one of the things we've talked about is because that image.
Well, the deck is towards the west, right? So it's gonna hardly be visible.
Well, the deck would be on the east
And the deck is
side.
more on the east,
Yeah.
seen from.
Okay, on the
this
east
is
side.
where-
The extension of the building would be on the west side, but the deck itself would be on the east side.
Okay.
Now, the other-
But wouldn't it be below the current wall anyway? Like you wouldn't see the deck.
You have
Primarily,
you might have
yeah.
a railing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a
So-
railing now.
So the thing that we are still kind of working on with structural is whether or not that unit actually should be lowered to the original level 2, because it currently sits on, as Julie likes to say, a house of cards, essentially.
That's
So
terrifying.
it's 3 feet of a house of cards, basically, that level 2.5 is built on. And so it could be that you take away the stair that's at the back of these front units, drop that unit so that level 2 is all level 2. You don't have.
You know, it's like half level.
Which would give us 3 additional feet to build within, and keeping it within that exterior brick wall, that original brick wall back there. Because the original parapet was this 2.5, 3 foot wall back here until they built that unit up.
Yeah, this is a personal preference, is that making the building more functional, getting an elevator and getting a stairway that meets code. That's also a desirable goal here. It's helping to extend the life of the building by doing those kinds
I
of
would
things.
agree with that.
So I would see some flexibility to accomplish it as a worthwhile thing.
Well, and if you have to drop that half level there, that's not an exterior. You know, that's nothing that we would have any kind of.
No, but it would definitely help the idea that, okay, now you've definitely got the deck covered, like you're not.
Yes.
It's hidden from view, yeah.
And one other thing to also like to mention is that, again, in terms of flexibility, one of the things the National Park Service rehab guidelines mention is trying to keep or have a similar type of use to the historic use. This is somewhat in the same category,
It is.
and that's actually one of the 10 criteria of the Secretary of Interior is, if you can, maintain the existing use. So this is kind of a close use to it, to when it was a movie house. Because I'm sure there were more than movies going on in that space.
It's like an event, like a community event space is kind of what we're hoping for.
And things that sort of extend the usability of the building is also, I think, a valid consideration in terms of some flexibility.
Just a couple of notes for HPRC. First and foremost, one thing that you haven't done recently, but you could do for this project if you're interested, is issue tax credits, which are a really effective way to make rehabilitation more cost effective. But with tax credits, there are some, we would want to make sure that it's aligned to the guidelines and all that kind of thing. But that could be something that we could do that could contribute to this project in a meaningful way. So that's just something to keep in your head. We will be going to the Saving Places Conference, which is in January. I have not talked to you two about that yet and whether your schedules will fit it. But if it can, the city will pay for it, and it's in Boulder, and it's a really great conference. And you guys should come too, since you're working on a
Sign
building.
us all up for that. one
Not
day.
everybody, just the people I have talked to so far. So
What are the dates for that?
like January 28th to February, is that right? To February 2nd? Yeah,
I think it's the 31st to the
that's
2nd.
close.
They usually have an extra day at the beginning that they charge
Okay.
extra for, which would be the 30th.
Okay. If you guys can attend, we'd love to have you. We have training budget for it.
Mention that, that's-
Okay. But the other thing I wanted to tell you is this project is gonna require more than just a COA. And even this elevator section is gonna have to be considered by council. Carla mentioned that before, that she's coming on the 8th to discuss that. But this project will go through what's called a final development plan, which is a planning process as well. So if the COA, whatever the COA and how that looks for this building, the other question I had is if it would be better to phase this work and there is more than one COA, just depending on how the work happened with the timeline for a COA and everything like that. But regardless, if a COA is issued by HPRC, it still needs to go through other processes to make sure that the project can work with city planning and our chapter 21 regulations that we have.
Well, we also talking about referring this to,
Probably this project will refer in the FDP, but also one of the criteria in the city's COA process is engineering review to make sure that this is a feasible design that could be built. And we've been discussing whether we would send this to a referral to another historic preservation entity, potentially like another historic architect, just for opinion on this rear facade and view shed and these kinds of questions that we've had. Which we have some latitude in our process to do that if that's something that would be desirable, because it takes, maybe some more of the subjective out of the question. So that, I just wanted to mention both of those facts. So this is not the only process this project will go through. And we're trying to work with the applicant from a staff perspective to make sure that they can go through these processes in a time efficient manner, but we will take the time we need to go through all the process.
Now, like the hotel, it would be possible to come back and do an amendment.
Yes.
yes.
In other words, particularly if there were a structural problem found, that would be a valid reason for
Right.
considering an amendment.
And we did have, on that project, the wall failed on the lodge. So there was that was why the amendment was issued. And that can be a staff amendment. It depends on what happens, but that could be at the staff level or it could be, yeah.
And there was also an amendment because of the availability of material, because of the,
Yes.
during COVID, there were certain materials that were just not available
Right.
at all. And so it's either delaying the project a year or two or
Right.
giving them an amendment to allow something that looks similar.
Just so, I don't know if you guys know this, we also, maybe last year, I think, we extended our COAs from 6 months to a year. So you do have a little bit of longer time and we can amend it as needed. Because prior to that, they were only 6 months and you had to keep coming back. And we extended that so that you have a year because,
You can build something.
well, the building process has gotten longer.
So the amendment, if you come back for an amendment, does that then extend it another year from the amendment, or how does that?
It's
Is it just,
It would.
Yeah.
The amendment is allowing you to, it's giving you a year to accomplish it.
gotcha, okay. So I just had a couple other images here. And so this is the back of Sit and Chill. And this is the back of, I believe, the Hanchett building. So Hanchett's one block west, but that's really seeing that 2-story. So this one is actually right against the alley. This one's 4 feet back, I believe, is what I measured today. And then Bojo's actually their patio, which is not 2 feet high, but their patio actually sits right up against the alley.
I'm fairly confident that image on the right, that garage door part of that building is an addition as well.
That would make sense because it is cinder blocks.
Right.
Can see the line.
So,
Historical cinder blocks.
yeah.
It's early. It's pretty old, but
Yeah, it is, but so just to try to, kind of talk about what we're really looking at here is we definitely be, so this is the line of the existing parapet back there. I don't know why it's got that kind of little thing to it. But so we would be eliminating this stairwell, this fire escape completely. We would be
Making a fake door,
requesting
possibly.
either a fake door, or if it's an original opening, a fake door, or we would be blocking it in so that,
Or it'd be a window that looks like a door,
gotcha. And I think that's doable.
a non-functional door.
If a couple other things we are considering with the digging out of the basement, we may need an egress on the west side There are some existing openings on that west side. I don't know if they were original to the original building, but we can, we know that, so these images actually show the building as that was neighboring it on that side. I don't know if those openings somehow had a passage between the two buildings or where those came into play, but
But there are several.
yeah, there are several there. You can't see them as well from the exterior, but we've got images of them from the interior. So Julie, in the demolition process, in the interior, it's the stucco has been removed from that interior wall, so you can actually see the original brick openings that have
You
been
need an egress on the west side or on the east side?
on the east side. Did I say west side?
Yeah, you said west side, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, how are you doing that?
Yeah, sorry, no,
An egress
I
into
meant
the-
east side.
Are you talking about an egress into the park?
Potentially. So that's another thing, and we're hoping we don't need it, but that was so the other conversation where we actually started this conversation was that first meeting with staff and Andy, where Andy said, wouldn't it be great when we put the band shell in Citizens Park, put the bandstand in Citizens Park, if there was some way to,
Overflow into our building
yeah,
for
So-
events.
That would require another approval, which would be an easement from
right.
the city to
Yeah.
do that.
But we still have a lot of studying to do before we know if we even need that egress, so, but from a conversation standpoint, we wanted, since we're here with you tonight, we wanted to sort of,
Everything's possible, but that's a city or more of a council conversation.
That's not us.
Yeah, you guys, you might have some,
no, but if we put that, if we,
she's saying you'd have to maybe talk about it potentially if there's another hole.
yeah, if there's another hole,
But there used to be, is what you're saying, and
there
that's
used
kind
to
of the
be.
point.
So
There
I
used to be a
think
couple of them, yeah.
So they're bricked up.
the other thing
Some more
is,
pictures and design ideas and
Yeah.
a little more information for.
Yeah. yeah. The other thing is, and I don't know how this, I know that there's a discussion in the city about bringing back the murals that were on the exterior of the walls around the historic district. There was a mural, you can tell there was a mural at some point, probably not in 1912, but sometime after the other building next to it
1985.
burned down. And so I don't know how that works from a historic standpoint, like, or is that a,
It's allowed. If you guys want to do it, it's totally allowed.
okay,
It's actually, I think, we don't have
so
anything.
that's a painting, I guess that falls under painting.
In our
so-
sign code, a mural doesn't count as a sign. So you can have like pictorial elements that might hint at a sign, but it can't have like lettering like a sign. That's all it
Gotcha.
says.
You
Okay.
can't be doing advertising.
Right.
As well as the
Because
mural.
then
But-
people would think it was historic.
But I guess because it's painting, that's sort of outside of the purview of
Yes,
you guys, okay?
although we would love to have murals in the city. I think that's a very commonly held ideal.
I will say, there is a section in the design guidelines that talks about, if a building's on the corner, which this one is kind of
Sort
on
of.
the corner. It is best to have openings on both sides so that there is, clearly define the primary entrance with, temporary interpretation. I think it's just- secondary public entrances are also encouraged on larger buildings, on a corner lot, and along an alley. So this is not really the corner, but it technically is the corner of a perceived historic.
And it's going to be visible from the side street, depending upon how long the trees live.
Well, do you know,
Right.
will that be blocked by the potential ban shell? And so this is.
It potentially could be. But all of that conversation is also, like I said, that thought originated from the city saying, wouldn't it be great if you've got this event venue and we're building this stage in the park, if maybe we started cooperating? And Julie said, well, that wasn't in my business plan, but I'm willing to consider it. Yeah.
What if the double doors were there
The double doors on the side.
instead of the back?
My honest concern is that's a public park and I would be concerned about it becoming too much of a private use. But I would
Oh, that's a good.
I would not say that I think that it's necessarily impossible, but I think we need to talk about it further to.
Yeah, and in what, the way I'm thinking about it right now, the reason it's even in this proposal is, or this discussion, is because we may need to be able to have it as an emergency egress
If we're gonna put the basement in.
if the basement is an entire, it's the size of the entire floor plate. We may need a secondary exit, and it wouldn't have to be a public access, but it would be an emergency egress, from the basement essentially. And again, I've got some architecting to do on it to make sure that that's even something we need.
Some architecting.
And like a 5-foot setback there, or.
Say that again?
What's your setbacks with?
HT has no setbacks.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Would you be able to use that?
Yeah, it's kinda great.
as a- it's gonna go-
Yes,
one that you
that would be
Yes.
one.
That'd be
Yeah.
one.
Oh, that, well, so the problem is because of the size of the floor plate, depending on kind of how we end up with it. Structural's looking at it right now, but so if it's this entire, probably wouldn't be the front 20 feet, but essentially it's this long. And so we would need, these exits would need to be further apart than half the diagonal of that entire space. So, we wouldn't quite meet that.
Wouldn't there be an exit going to the front? Wouldn't that be one of the two exits?
It would, that
On the
could
main
be,
floor, yeah, but not for the basement.
that could be an option where we'd have to build a stair up to the front to get out to the adjoining space. So there's a lot of tricky things here, and one of those tricky things, first and foremost, is structural, saying, okay, you can safely scour out the entire basement, or you can safely scour out 20 feet of the basement, or, there's ways of doing it. It's increasingly more expensive.
And are you using the IEBC code instead of, okay?
Yeah. I think we pretty much got it. So then we talked about the roof deck. And this is really just a zone. It's a little bit deceptive, and I'm going back and forth on how high I should make that zone, but because it is the stair tower comes up that high for a second level.
That's showing the addition?
That, not necessarily. It's a very preliminary sketch.
How much higher would the addition be than what we're seeing there?
It probably wouldn't be any,
Wouldn't be any higher.
yeah, it wouldn't be any.
So
higher.
that looks pretty subordinate, if that's the case.
That does look supportive. Even for that sloped roof, that is not necessarily original, it's still supportive.
The view looking north made it seem like it was like way high
Yeah.
tower, but this is like more middle, I think.
Yeah, and that's what the images are deceptive because it is, you're standing on the ground and it feels higher, but further you get away from it, the lower it kind of goes.
And is the red box, is that the elevator or is that, where's the red box?
Yeah, that,
So is it, but it's not in the right of way, is it?
no,
Okay.
well, that's part of the conversations coming up with the city.
Okay,
Yeah,
I imagine that might be kind of an issue for the city, putting something in the right
Right
of
of
way.
way.
Yeah, I think the thing is that's what I was saying, this has got to go through several processes. And we do need to pretty strongly interrogate these, but it's coming to council on the 8th for that conversation. And what we're just trying to do is give the team here a good basis so that they can make informed design choices. But if you guys are interested, this will come to city council on the 8th for a conversation about that space.
But not a hearing.
Not a hearing,
So
we're
it's still
still
a
pre-app.
conversation?
And so it's not an application.
Yeah, really, because the design is predicated on whether or not they can build that. And we have some questions about if that's like a wall or if it's more of a fence, that brick. Like, or if it's like a part of the building or if it's not. And it sounds like you're talking about like an addition. But there's rules about if it just, we have rules about walls too that are, and fences in the code, and there's like a lot of different controlling factors here, and it needs to go through a final development plan, which is a fairly involved process, so. There's,
So- Yeah, so just for your, this slide is really more for that upcoming meeting. But, so you can see sort of these blue lines here, you can see them up there. So this addition would sit back a foot or so from the curb line essentially. But in essence, the property line it's actually coming over the property line, say 3 feet. So we'd be asking for 3 feet. But what we'd be building would not be in what is recognized as the right of way right now. It's behind, it's not really a curb, but say it's that curb. And so you can see in this aerial view, Bojo's deck goes right up to that curb.
So you're not encroaching on the public right of way.
well,
Well, if it's 3 feet over, even though it's not the understood right of way, it is the legal right of way.
Right.
there's also high pressure gas lines and 3-phase electric and all sorts of stuff in that alley, so there's a lot of, we're like a really preliminary stage in the whole conversation.
Is it infrastructure that has to be?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about it, but that's why we're gonna have a very similar meeting to this with city council, just so that we
Is it
can,
during a work session?
yes, it's on the 8th. It'll be the primary item in that work session.
So that'll be Zoom.
Yes. I think nobody's saying there's no like yes or no answer. It's about what we've been trying to do this whole time is talk, and like it comes to this popcorning idea of like just trying to figure out what could work within what you're trying to do. So we've been working a lot with the applicant from the staff level. We've gotten some of the primary concerns about the project already figured out in terms of like parking and what's expected for that and all those kinds of things. So that's a big one in downtown is figuring out parking. So in my mind, that's like, Floyd Hill, and now we're headed up towards the tunnels. So
there's no change of use that would have to go through planning?
this is a change of use, but it isn't
25%?
currently over 25%. That's correct. It's like 17%.
Okay.
Why is it a planned development rather than just being straight zoning?
Because it is a basement addition that's greater than 50%, so it kicks it into the final development plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not a
Oh, it's
planned
40,
development,
yeah,
but
it
it's
is
a final
straight,
development.
Right, yeah, it is straight zoning. It's just, it's not a plan development, it's an FDP process.
But it's within the threshold that it can be an administrative final development plan.
Right, it's just the same as everything, it's just, it doesn't have a hearing.
Okay. So in a sense, it is regular zoning.
It's just because of the addition, so we're just looking at impacts. Can I ask you a question, just my curious? Those boarded up windows, are they in the same scale as the doorway, or are they smaller than the doorway?
You're talking about those things
On-
over the door?
Yeah,
Those are actually like, it's got fans in them, really.
Like to pull air
Exhaust,
through.
Yeah. And MEP hasn't completely dug into the project yet, but the intent would be that we do not need fans there anymore. It could be, and we need to look at the coursing on the brick. I don't know why I didn't consider that earlier.
They might be transoms.
Yeah,
They might have been transoms.
yeah. I mean, there's,
It's a little window above a door.
And that was their airflow.
that was what I was wondering about the scale.
Yeah.
which is kind of weird though, because there's like 3 feet between, which is I'm not used to seeing that as a transom, but it basically is acting like that.
And they might have, it's possible if it was a transom, they had it arched.
Yeah,
That's not an arch over the door, right? That's just patching or something.
it appears to just be patching. We know that on the like right up against, so there is a stairwell down right sort of in this area in the middle of the building. There's a well basically to get you into the basement back
Right
there.
where they would drop coal down the furnace.
Mhm.
It's like a exterior.
Can I ask one more question? I'm just asking you double advocate. I have no opinion on it. I'm just for my benefit. The reason the elevator can't be built inside the building, like what is the thought about that? Like instead of having an addition?
So the stair has to be, the stair's not safe the way it is right now, and that will be Julie's primary entrance to her unit, but really the other two units that are up there as well.
Could you go back to your floor plan?
Actually, there is a stair at the front, I guess those two could be the front.
Yeah.
The other part of that is, we want to get the elevator as far away from, so we have considered some other locations. The problem with this location is against this shared wall is that if we put the live room next to the shared wall, then the shared wall will hear all of the sound coming through.
Like the drums and all of that will come through.
The problem with putting the elevator next to that shared wall is that you've got to build a pit for it. So you've not only got to build the basement, you've got to build the pit even further. And what structural has initially told us is you actually don't want to build, you actually want a 45-degree angle of dirt against that wall to shore it basically on that, so that wall is stable as a shared wall. So what we're looking at is the basement potentially could be 10 feet in from this side and potentially 10 feet in from this side, because you've got to get the shoring for those existing foundation walls.
I would obviously like the basement to be bigger than that, but it may be cost prohibitive, because once you start getting closer to the shared wall, then.
And you're
The
setting
structure's
back
fine.
because you would be disturbing the building next door to where it get cracking and stuff.
So it's a structural issue to dig out the basement. And so putting that elevator against that wall is the ideal place
For us.
but it's cost prohibitive and potentially it's not a good idea. So if we're building the stair outside, we said, okay, let's look at this, let's look at the elevator with the stair. Now, if it comes down to proportions and there's concerns about that, then obviously we need to look at that and figure out what that happy medium is there.
Dylan, do you have any thoughts about, with this as an addition and the staircase and elevator as an addition? Do you think that we need to consider that as a part of GFA? Because we really didn't.
A part of what, say that again?
Of the GFA for the whole building.
Gross floor area.
It was included. It would have been included in those numbers I gave you as the
It would normally be counted.
Okay, where was it? Which, did you, like in back of house or?
Yeah, it probably would have been in back of house.
Or we can,
But I have to read based on our conversation yesterday. I have to kind of recalculate that and tighten it down so we can make sure.
yeah, sorry.
All of that.
If you go down the stairs right here,
Put that in.
and just kind of wrap back towards this way, you'll see them kind of like right
That's the
here.
majority of its business.
Like keep going like this.
Yeah.
There's this one.
By the refrigerator.
Yeah.
They would,
It would also access the basement.
they would also access the basement, which is primarily basement business.
I wonder if we could count other codes, which I don't think ours do, would count stairs as only every other level. So you don't count because you have to go both directions. Like you'd only count half the
I see what you're
stairs
saying.
because,
You wouldn't count the landings, the middle landing.
I think most places do. It depends what the building code says. But the thing is, when you get to the bottom of the stairway, there is a floor there. So technically there is floor area every level.
Yeah,
But some places may count it differently.
from a building code standpoint, you would count it whether or not the municipal code, how the municipal code looks at it. And that's, again, that conversation about, okay, are the same occupants who are driving to the site, using the site are those the same occupants in the live room that are using the stairs, or are there additional people using the stairs? And to me, from a parking standpoint, those people using the stairs are not in addition to the people using the rest of the building, but that's
That's not
you
what
guys
that's,
to consider.
Yeah, and that's how the parking code is written, that's how the parking code section is written. It's like some places will say it's, you don't count exterior walls, you don't count the wall thickness, or you don't count the bathrooms.
part of our thing that we've been talking about this is that part of our code has a GFA requirement for parking spaces and part of it has like a fixed seat requirement. And so this building is a mixed use and there's gonna be a mixed use reduction, so I think we should be clear about that. It's not like we're double counting here at all. But we do need to determine a little better, like how we're gonna, and we have some questions about that, like if I think like the studio space as has been anticipated, we can cover, it falls within the parking that we have available for it now, like in its pre-2018 numbers essentially. But depending on how that's used, I think there's even some flexibility now. We've been looking at I don't know if you remember this from your time here, Mike, but there's a definition in code that's not allowed in the HD and it's called event center or something to that effect. It's not allowed in HD, but where we've been having issues is that if this is ever used for like a performance space, it's not a fixed seat performance space. So it seems unfair to count as a theater where you have one space per 4 seats. So we've been trying to figure out if there's a reasonable way that we could accommodate this use. Right, and we've even talked about maybe we could just call it a bar, even if it doesn't necessarily have to be a bar, but then it could use like a GFA like approach to looking at the parking requirement, which would be much more realistic for what the actual use is maybe.
Or it could even be a code amendment.
Right, that
In other
too.
words, this is, I would say just from a planning standpoint, not historic, this is a desirable use for downtown to be there. So it may be worthwhile looking at, do the parking requirements accommodate this type of use or other uses that would be desirable downtown?
So I think on parking, we're like 95% there. We've got like just a little bit of tweaking at the end. But I think for your process here, the COA, just remember there is a final development plan here. And there will be other processes, they've discussed some requests that they have for city council. And so there will be some other processes associated with that. So the way that we kind of talked about this, just so you guys understand from a process perspective, is that A, they need to know whether they can design what they want to design, which is COA. B, they need to know if city council is amenable to letting them use city property in the way that they've discussed tonight. That's another process. And then finally, there's the final development plan process, which is the official process of the city to kind of bless the design. And that's kind of like where we look at all of the architectural and other zoning guidelines that we have for the city for the project. And then like Carla said, that's an administrative review, but basically there's a bunch of different pieces we do. And then once they're done with that, and you can see here, she's got building permits. Now this process is all predicated on the idea that everything goes, exactly perfectly and there's no questions that, it's not a to give a mouse a cookie situation on anything like we find in engineering or anything like that. But generally speaking, what we've been trying to do is help, keep this process moving. And so I guess what I'd like to do is just bring it around to this idea that Mike had about sketches. Carla, is that a reasonable thing to do, do you think, in January?
I think so.
Okay, and we wouldn't need like a high level of detail. I think we're looking at like just something to give a more firm idea of what you're thinking.
Mhm.
We'll also be meeting on Thursday with the applicant, Dylan and I, just because we've got, we're trying to keep coordinated on the project. And so I think that if we could schedule the January 3rd, the third Tuesday, whatever that Tuesday is in January for HPRC, and we could have those drawings, we could bring those back to you guys, and then we could do this like one more time, basically with something in front of you.
And sketches could be freehand, it could be
Yeah.
markers.
And we'd have also an idea about what direction potentially city council is going in, even if they're not done yet.
Okay.
So I think that could help too. So that could, because I think really that's one of the questions that is in the guidelines is this and I think Mike kind of spoke to this for a minute. He said, is what you're proposing, because there's an element to what you're proposing that needs to make, is this the best path forward, I guess is the best way to say it. Like, is there another way to do it? Is this the best way to do it? And they can help with that. And then we can figure out, because then the other thing I wanted to note is that to do the final development plan, you're still going to be required to have a community meeting before you apply for FPP. So I just wanted to put that
Even
in
though
your
it's an
timeline.
administrative,
It's still all the same, everything,
okay.
but that's not a big deal.
What's a community meeting?
People are gonna love, people are gonna love it, it's not gonna be a big deal.
No, it's not
But you
hard.
basically have to post it and say, you know, you wanna come find out about the projects?
And is that meeting here?
That would be here, and basically, usually what we do is have storyboards. And then you can talk about it a little bit, and then the real intention of it is for people to say, hey, this is a great project, or hey, I think you should consider this or that or the other, and it's supposed to help inform your application. And then once you've done that, you can apply officially. There's a mailing that goes out before that community meeting. It can actually go out before the, well, in this case, it has to go out before the community meeting because there's no public hearing. And then, once that's done, the application can go in and then we can consider the rest and go permits.
John, remind me what the timeline is on the community meeting.
It just says before application.
Oh, there's not like a 10-day or,
Is the notice 10 days or?
We typically, it's a mailing, and I would assume that we probably want to give reasonable notice.
I think it's in chapter 21.
Yeah,
22, how many days notice
I
you
saw
need.
it.
We'll double check. Oh, 14?
Yeah, I think just use whatever standard.
Okay.
It's mailings 14 days prior to the community
is
meeting.
that in 21?
Yeah, it's 21-86.
And then we would have to we'll post the site, once you do the COA, so once we're coming to hearing, we'll have to put a sign on the site, and I think we may have to put it, well, no, because you only have one front, well. I think it says something like your frontage, but if it is on two,
It says,
we could probably argue that Idaho Street right there that's Idaho Mall technically.
We can probably talk about this on Thursday.
Yeah, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
these are what we've got to do for
Yeah,
the hearing.
okay, no, I appreciate
And
that.
staff prepares the sign, so
Yeah,
No.
sign or signs.
yeah,
And there's no newspaper, so,
It used to say newspaper.
yeah.
You
why
gotta
is
take it
there,
out.
why is there no newspaper?
There's a Clear Creek County one. They
Oh,
have
no,
some official notices in that.
the town, the city actually did have a newspaper requirement, which no one knew about until I came here.
Oh,
And so we had it for about 3 months and the clerk said, take it out.
yeah, that's funny. My computer died. My charger went. But I was at the end of my presentation, so I thank you all
Yeah,
for
thank you
your
so
time
much.
tonight.
Does this help you with some ideas for moving forward?
It does, yeah, it was super helpful, so I appreciate it. It's good to get the temperature of, you know, how.
Yeah, and just know what's even permissible, so we don't waste time on things that aren't.
Well, if you're not
permissible.
sure, look at the
So.
design guidelines, because they have, and they're very clear about, is it preferred, is it appropriate, is it not appropriate? You know, so they're very clear, even though they don't say yes or no, they're very clear on what we would like to see and what we would not like to see.
Right, right. No, and I think hearing what your thoughts are from the initial, or not sketches, but the initial kind of diagrams, is super helpful, so.
Have you gone to the Historical Society to see if they have any other photos you can get a hold of?
Yeah, they have.
Really nothing.
Yeah.
Don't they have something like 10,000 photos?
Not
We
to the
do-
back
you
of our
know-
building, unfortunately.
Or my house or.
No, we do, but
I'll
it's
try
because
asking
every
if they
time
will
somebody
let me see it.
passes, we get their entire photo album.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily pictures of downtown,
Oh, okay.
unfortunately,
Or a building,
or
I
buildings,
mean,
yeah.
relatives.
Yeah, Dan, I guess, looked for us.
If you couldn't find it, you're not.
Nobody can.
It's not-
Dan,
it doesn't
yeah, Dan,
exist.
Dan went back like 3 different times to look,
Wow.
and then I looked at all 80 pages of under mining Idaho Springs.
Did you
and-
watch Downhill Racer?
I did, I watched Downhill Racer. And yeah, I'm not finding anything.
Something someday that would be worthwhile doing is contacting CDOT to see what they collected.
That
Since
would
they
be
tore out so much of the city here,
Oh, that's true.
they actually might have photographs.
Site
Does it
photos.
Chippo, wouldn't Chippo have that stuff?
No, CDOT's an entirely different department, so
Chippewa has a.
departments
has
don't,
some, not very
departments don't
much.
talk to each other.
It's strange that they would like require them to store it.
They have this really cool library. It's awesome. You should go sometime, but like the Idaho Springs file, it's big, but it's also not
See that?
super heavy on the pictures. No, the State
Oh.
Historic Preservation Office.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just not, there's the national designations and all that kind of stuff, but they don't have a lot of other stuff.
Would actually be interesting, to actually not just photos, but the plans. Because there should be detailed plans of everything they tore out.
Supposedly, there's a bunch of glass slides in the basement of, Westwinds, not Westwinds, whatever Westwinds is now. That have been down there for like 80 years or something of downtown buildings, but
Has to
They've
go
been
talk
lost
to
ones
them.
in
it's like a rumor.
In Westwinds,
Yeah, in the basement. Supposedly they have like boxes and boxes of them.
Patty, we may have to go over.
I talked to Urbano over at Margarita next time.
Are there any other questions for our applicants? And do you guys have any other questions for us?
I don't think so.
Not until we're gonna have to do this one more time probably.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate
Wrap my mind
you
around it.
suggesting, and allowing us to come back again before the actual application. I think that's super helpful. And
And just knowing that we could do that addition and the deck on top as long as we fall within those guidelines and what those deadlines are. So that we design it accordingly and don't have to come back, again and again. So that's awesome.
The sketches are important to me because my imagination when you draw square lines is not
No.
very good. So being able to see a sketch of what you think it's gonna look like. I
Potential
think
material.
those are important. so
Potential
that we have a
materials are
better
really
idea than
important
just
too.
Lines and architecture.
Because unfortunately, we have seen, you guys know this, we have seen some projects where we've seen materials and the materials were not used or they were not appropriate in how they chose materials, and it's kind of hard to correct that when it's already on the building.
right,
It's, in some places might require sample boards, but maybe for the next meeting, just photographs of the materials you're thinking about using.
yeah, no, I think that's,
I think one other thing that would also be worthwhile is to get a better understanding of that existing addition on the second floor, because that actually has a sort of a big impact on all this, because the building has already been altered probably after the period of significance.
the building has been altered multiple times.
Yeah, but I mean, there already is a second floor addition that most likely was put on there after the period of significance.
After 20.
Right, and so, we can document that with the photos we've taken and that kind of stuff. Is that what you're thinking, or
Well,
kind of a diagram better explaining it?
it's sort of put it this way, is that if you were dealing with an extremely strict jurisdiction, they would say, no, you can't put an addition on the back because it's visible from the street.
Gotcha, okay.
Part of it is saying, okay, are there other factors involved, and one of which is understanding that someone has already modified the building after the period of significance.
Okay.
So it already is an altered structure.
Are you guys gonna tuck point on the back of that building? I noticed it. Okay,
Yeah, it's in terrible shape.
okay.
The whole, so we had Rocky Mountain brick, is that what they're called? Rocky Mountain Restoration, they're specific to brick and restoring brick. Can't remember what they're called. Lindsay Lopez has used them on different things. But he came out and he actually was pointing things out on the brick to us that it is visible to the naked eye, but
You'd have to have some knowledge about it.
yeah, like, where there's certain cracks and certain, where that building was attached to the
Birdies
east.
that built it
Yeah.
right down.
There
Where
was,
people are
there was some very specifics, like he could really kind of walk you through a lot of, some of the history really of what likely happened or what likely was there from what he was seeing and on the brick that was exposed there, so.
They're like, that's a special kind of nerd, it's a brick. person.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. So when the stucco came down on the inside, there's actually, it appears like there's two different stairs on the one wall, on the east, the west wall.
There used to be,
The party wall, but it still exists. There were two different types of there were two directions of stairs at different times, assumingly different times of history. Which then says, well, okay, so when was that upper level even built? Or was that second floor even there when they built the initial building, and was it a false front? for a while, I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of questions there, but the building was 1912, so when we were originally, and John, you thought it was older than that, it kind of made more sense to me that there was all this stuff going on, but from 1912 to now, we know the majority of that use was in fact a theater, so.
Yeah, the house is there on the 1907 map, and the theater doesn't show up until the map, it's a Sandburg map from the 1930s.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me that the erected sign says 1912, because I can't find anything between 1912 and 1930 that shows that building, but I can't find a photo between, like, I can't find a 1920s photo, or at least one that's dated to be one.
One other way of checking it would be the assessor's records, if you wanted to go look at those,
Yeah, that's
because
a
you would
good
see
idea.
a jump in the value. When construction takes place.
Makes sense.
It's not on the Sandboard map till the thirties.
The next map, 1907, is the map that's referred to as 1931, 39.
Oh,
Mm,
There's no map in between.
There's like
Oh my
this weird
gosh.
gap in photos as
Yeah.
well as maps.
I've got those maps,
No
it's
one
just
documented anything for 20
they're
years.
still under copyright. The ones from
You're busy.
the maps from the 30s are still under copyright, but they do have
Do
that.
whatever.
is it like a war depression thing, or that they're not in, that there's a
Why
gap?
they
or-
didn't do it? Normally, it meant there wasn't a lot of construction activity happening
Oh.
during that time period. Basically, the mining industry in the state had largely cratered before World War One.
Yes.
And a lot of particularly brick buildings stopped being built. There weren't many built. Movie theater would have been something different though. That would have been, introducing something new at that point.
Maybe you guys need a really
Really
cool
old
marquee like they used to have.
all right, only just because
Really
it's
old.
almost 8, I'm
Yeah.
going to say, are there any more?
Yeah, you guys
back
have been
and forth?
fabulous.
Yes, thank you so much.
Then I will call our work session done, and thank you. Oh, did you have, Jessica?
I was gonna suggest if we do meet again, as a possible topic in January, to sort of talk about what we want to try and do during 2024.
So you came in a little bit late. Ladies, if you're all done, you don't have to stick around for this one.
Thank you very
Um,
Thank you
much.
so much. Nice
No,
meeting all
Thank
of
you guys for
Thank
coming.
you for coming in. We are actually gonna talk about sites and facilities. That is still up in the air. I have a timeline that I would like to see happen, but we're not quite there yet, because we still have to work with the city. And there's some other things. And yes, there are things on the to-do list from after we came out of Saving Places last year of things that I would like to see, happen for us, that outside of just doing our COAs.
And Mike, this is Dylan. He's our new planner. He's been here like 20 days-ish.
That long. He hasn't
yeah.
run away screaming. That's always a good thing.
So we've actually been making progress on a lot of things that it's been great having him here, I guess, is what I'm saying. So hopefully we can start having these, we can pick up some of this work that we've been talking about.
When I left, there was a memo I gave to Jared of sort of, here's all these things that have happened in the time that I was here and Barbara here, included all the code amendments that needed to be made. I don't know whatever happened with that list, but there was a list of like about 50 different possible
Oh,
code
I'd like to
amendments.
see that because,
I-
good Lord, we gotta update some.
Yeah, we've got some, I have noticed that there are several things that need to be adjusted in the code too.
Our design guidelines have to be
And
updated.
And there's also an attorney confidential memo about an entirely different list.
Okay. Do you know if
Should be on the hard
shared
drive.
drive?
Should be on the shared drive, yeah.
All right, well, we can,
If you can't find it, let me know, because I would have my memo.
okay, we can look at that tomorrow.
Anything else, Ken?
We also had talked about maybe doing a sites and facilities tour, so I'm gonna send out a doodle poll for dates, and then I signed you up for Saving Places, because we talked. And I think, do you have
I
thoughts about it?
could possibly do 2 days. I could check with my workplace and.
Well,
see
if you wanna do
what's
that, and let me know, we have time. We had like an early bird thing, and so I talked to everybody that I could easily talk to, and then we still have the money to put anybody else who wants to come in, so.
And it's usually Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with most of the sessions, I think, Thursday, Friday.
There's a really cool one where they're gonna go see the sugar mill in Longmont, which is a really cool building that they're repurposing right now. And I think it's gotta be the coolest building I've ever been in my whole life, so I signed everybody up for that, just like, because I know it's gonna fill up, but you don't have to go.
In Wellington, they have a grain elevator that was converted into a brewery.
Oh, that's cool. Have you been to the sugar mill? It's
So
so,
before we get into that, I'm gonna go ahead and end our
Okay,
meeting,
sounds
and
good.
then we can just chit chat, but, what time